walking the serpentine path, following the footsteps of the ancestors, walking the serpentine path, making our way back home. Hey ya, hey, hey ya, ho, hey ya, hey ya, hey ya, ho, hey ya, hey, hey ya, ho. Following the serpentine path, life. Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Serpentine Path podcast. My name is Claire Waudia Seed, and I'm a plant walker, song keeper, word weaver, artisana, visual and performance artist, womb wisdom keeper, and your guide on this serpentine path of life. Together, we'll dive deep into all things related to plant medicine, ancestral reconnection, intergenerational healing, womb sovereignty and bodily autonomy, rites of passage and initiation, time travel, shape-shifting, dimension hopping, the reclamation of our collective earth-based practices, and the ongoing, never-ending cycle of birth, death, and rebirth. Welcome to the serpentine path where the ancestors have called us back to. Let's start at the end and find our way back home together. Hello, everyone. Before we jump into this episode, I wanted to throw a little note into the introduction, like how I did last episode with Nicole Granati. So this episode is with one of my teachers, Qiddist Ashé, and she is the creatrix of a space called the Womb Room. We talk about the womb room a lot in this episode. However, it's important to note that within the past month, I believe, Qiddist has actually renamed that online space and educational resource to the Holy Well. So we're going to say it a lot in this episode, the womb room, the womb room, the womb room. However, now you can find all of her offerings under the name the Holy Well. So I'm going to put that in the show notes so that you can find her through that name. The other thing that we didn't talk about at all in this interview is that Qiddist also has her own podcast, which is actually how I originally found her. It's a really great podcast with lots of awesome stories and interviews and conversations. And that podcast is called The Womb Room. So if you are interested in the kind of stuff that we talk about in this episode, I highly recommend going and checking out her podcast. I will also link that in the show notes. Otherwise, there's a lot of stuff that we talk about in this episode that require links for a lot of different programs that she's offering, so that will all be in the show notes as well. Otherwise, I hope you guys enjoy. This was such a beautiful episode to record together, and I'm really excited to share it with you all. So, without further ado, let's get into it. Hello, everyone, and welcome back to the Serpentine Path podcast. I'm extremely excited. I say this at the beginning of every episode because I'm always excited about every guest that I have because you guys are amazing. But I'm incredibly excited to welcome one of my teachers to the show, Qiddist Ashé. Working with Qiddist and learning from her over the past 3 months has been profound. And so it's a really, really big honor and big blessing to have her on the show. So thank you so much, Qiddist, for being here.
Thank you so much for having me, Claire. When I heard your voice in the womb room, I was like, oh, I cannot wait to be in circle with you and hear more about your work. And so I'm honored to, yeah, get to share with you and get into some juicy conversation together.
Yeah, thank you so much. I'm excited. So, I've been starting every episode with my guests with this question, which is if your ancestors were here with us now, because of course they always are, how would they introduce you? And what role would they say that you play in your family lineage?
Mm. Ooh, such a juicy question. I'm gonna sit, see what comes through they have to say. Mm. It's funny because I the words that come up are a little bit different than how I would describe myself, but the the words that I heard are remembering and uh, mischievous play, which is funny because when I think about my essence and who I am and my child self, there is this like lightness and play and a way of alchemizing through play that feels very innate to me. And yet, my life and my personality kind of got built in opposition to that a little bit, got built very seriously. And so when I tap into how my ancestors would describe me and the role I play, there's something about being the one to remember, remembering the old ways, remembering who we are, remembering the medicine keeping, but also doing it in a way that is light and playful and restoring a sense of play to the lineage where there has been so much removal of that capacity to play, due to war or famine or oppression or whatever it is, and of struggle. And I think my life is really a dance with those things of how do we restore a sense of ease and play and liberation into medicine keeping. And yeah, my mother's lineage were midwives and medicine women in Ethiopia. My mother was raised by her grandmother, who was a midwife, and um, I didn't know her on this earthly plane, but she is certainly here, here pushing me along on the path.
So beautiful. Thank you. And it's funny when I've asked this question to a lot of people who have come on the show, and when I've asked this question to myself, it's a very similar answer, which is like being the one who remembers. And there's a lot of weight that comes with that. And I myself have felt that unbelievable pressure and also pressure that I've put in on myself of like, but I'm the one. And I'm like, chill. Like you have your whole life slash many lifetimes to do this. And it's something that learning from you has really transformed for me, which is the play and the curiosity. For just to give a little background to the listeners of like how I got connected to you, is that I've been in your practitioner level training of Sovereign Cycles, which is all about working with plants for pregnancy prevention and pregnancy release outside of the medical system. And that's a heavy topic. Like, that is not a light and fun and easy thing, or it also can be in ways. And there can be joy and play, and there can be curiosity, and there can be exploration, and there can be ease. And that's something that I've loved so much in learning from you, is that you're able to take these really intense moments, these rites of passages, these like liminal spaces and moments of like, yeah, true, like going deep into the darkness and being like, there's light here, actually, you know? So I want to move on because I feel like I could talk and talk and talk about how much I've appreciated learning from you, but I also want to give you a little bit of space now to share about all the work that you do in the world. You're a very multidimensional human. So if you want to give people like a little background of how you show up in the world and what your path has been and what your visions are, excuse me, what your visions are moving forward.
Thank you, Claire. I'm receiving that with a lot of love. Oh, the many paths in the world. Yeah, I've my whole life people have sort of tried to figure me out or put me in a box. They're like, you do all these things, you are all these things. How are they possibly related? They all seem so different. And I've always had the sense of, I think the motivating word for me has always been liberation. Liberation on an inside out way from the inside moving into the collective. And then what does that mean? Yeah, for collective liberation. And liberation is inherently intersectional, meaning I've traversed many realms. I've been a first grade teacher. I'm a midwife. I have been in women's health for the last decade. I run a nonprofit. I'm a farmer. Um, I'm a sister. I'm a daughter. I'm a wife. Uh, and all of those things feel like one thing to me. The womb room feels like one element, one expression of world building, of how do we create the futures that we want to see for many future generations, and how do we move there in a way that is from a place of liberation. So when I was in my teens and early 20s, I was in a lot of like social political movement work. And what I saw was this way of like fighting to get to a freedom place. And it never really seemed to work because in the effort of fighting, we actually end up recreating the same systems we thought we were trying to get away from. And so my ethos and what I weave into the womb room and my work with land and Black farmers in Oregon and even in our sister circles is really like how, and not perfectly, right? It's like messy and we're human, but this question of what would it be like to move as if the liberation were already here and create from that place rather than like, I'm gonna like struggle in the hopes that we one day get to this mythical freedom place. And so what that looks like practically for me is the womb room is one expression of that, which is a global learning and medicine place. And I've been describing it as a school, a church, and a clinic because it is. It's all those things. For women to orient to their body and their symptoms as a path to liberation and to hone their own sense of self and medicine in the world. And then as we like uncover these deep layers and shed old patterning and traumas, the essence that we're left with, then like, what do you get to do with it? What do you want to create with it that is your medicine to offer the world, not out of obligation, but out of like pure aliveness? And so I think of myself as a steward of that in others and in myself. And yeah, the land is certainly just another expression of that. So I don't know, I'm sure we'll get more into the land pieces in a bit, but it all weaves together. And in the past, I went to herbal school and I was working one-on-one with women with herbal medicine primarily, and then studied a lot of different fields in female health, from quantum biology to homeopathy to hormones, and then really landed in this place of working with the paradigm of understanding our psychobiology. So how our experiences and our perceptions of our experiences impact our body on a cellular level and can give us the map to understand our symptoms, and even more so than understand our symptoms, the map to understand like what we're here on earth to unwind and awaken in us. And so all of those things, yeah, weave together uh, in my work. And I guess the last thing they're like, don't forget to talk about God. The other thing that I'll say is, for me, this work is also about merging the steep, like, rigor and curiosity of science with the mystical magic that is our existence and that is the universe and that is how I orient to God or source. And so often those worlds feel separate. There's like the magic mystical realm, and then there's the like scientific literature realm. And ever since I was a kid, I was like, these are one thing, everyone. They're one thing. And so, yeah, my prayer is that the spaces that I steward get to be a meeting place for all of that, where we can actually bring all of those pieces together because we're not these compartmentalized beings, right? We are multidimensional, literally multidimensional beings uh, that are like learning how to be free here on Earth. And that is very exciting to me.
Oh, thank you. Such a beautiful response. And it's something that I relate to so deeply, and that I talked with one of my dear friends on the last one of the last episodes, my friend Allegra, which is like the medicine woman path is not one that can be compartmentalized. And I think so much about my own life of like, I'm an artist and I'm a dancer and I'm a singer and I'm a ceremonialist. And also, like, I'm really obsessed with all of these weird scientific niches that wouldn't really be seen as spiritual in any way. And also, like, I'm not going to go into all of the things that I do in this life. I've lived 1,001 lifetimes, and I've felt that pressure, like you said, of being put in a box and being put in a niche and saying, this is what I do, this is what I offer to the world. And just like wanting to just break out of that and be like, no, but that's not true. And I think the reality is moving through the world as all of us do with all of the medicine that we carry, it also requires integration. And like you said, which is something that two of the other women that I'm learning with right now, Rochelle Saliga of Innate Postpartum, and then Wapio of the Matrona, they both are like, their work is undergirded with that same mentality of like Wapio always says, like, I like my mysticism with science and I like my science with the mysticism.
Yes.
Because without the science, the mysticism is just like way too woo woo, too up in the clouds, too up in the ethers. It's not grounded. And without the mysticism, the science is like way too flat. And so it doesn't surprise me that I ended up learning with women like them and women like you who are really doing that connective work of being like you said, it's all the same thing. It's all
Mhm.
the same thing. We're just using different language to talk about the exact same thing. And the connections are where the magic is and where the healing is and where the intelligence is as well.
Mhm.
So,
Mhm.
so
Oh,
cool.
so beautiful, and so much gratitude to Wapio and Rochelle
They're
for both.
amazing. They're
Yeah.
amazing. Okay, cool. So, you have mentioned the womb room, which I just want to tell listeners that's the basically like online education portal that you have created with other women in the womb room, other educators, other midwives, that kind of thing. And a few weeks ago in class, during the California fires, you opened the space by kind of talking about that, checking in with people, seeing how people were doing. And you brought up that in Octavia Butler's book, Parable of the Sower? Yes, Parable of the
Oh,
Sower, she predicted that there were going to be all these big fires starting in February of 2025. And then you said, this body of work is what influenced and deeply impacted my desire to create the womb room. And as soon as you
yeah.
said that, I was like, whoa, what? I don't know anything about this. So I would love if you would share a little bit about Octavia Butler's prophetic teachings and how
Mhm.
that's informed all of your work as an educator, as a midwife, as a women's healthcare practitioner, and all of
Mhm.
the other things that you do.
Yes, thank you for asking me this and inviting me into this conversation. It's one that I don't speak about as often perhaps as I would like to. And as I was in my late teens and early 20s, I was really deeply informed by Black speculative fiction writers, particularly Black women writers, like Octavia Butler, like Alexis Pauline Gumbs, and uh, the idea that Octavia Butler speaks about, which is that her writing is very prophetic. If you read her books, there's even the same tagline essentially of "Make America Great Again" of the president in her novel. There's all of these things where it's like, okay, very, very accurate to what's happening right now. This is written, a few decades ago. But she says, she's like, I'm not seeing the future. I'm listening to what's happening right now and drawing some conclusions about if we follow this path of right now, this is what it might look like. And there are a million ways that it could look, but we are all responsible for creating and co-creating those futures. And her books can be they are quite dark and intense. And some people are like, oh my gosh, how do you? But there's also, speaking to what you said earlier of, which is so kind, and I'm like holding that in my heart of, you said something about how I can like take people into these dark places and be like, and there's light here. In her books and in Parable of the Sower and Parable of the Talents, there's this gorgeous richness to, everything's falling apart. It's an apocalypse, right? There's fires up and down the West Coast. People are walking the freeways, moving up north, which I've seen people walking the freeways up here now. It's quite fascinating. Um, Infrastructure has collapsed, and in its place, uh, the main character in the book, Lauren Olomina, is creating uh, this community of humans that are going to steward what's next and looking at how do we do community differently? How do we look to thriving beyond surviving? How do we take what we have right now and build with it? And where is there beauty in that, in the collapse? And even the word apocalypse means an unveiling, right? It doesn't mean just death and doom. It means unveiling and uncovering. And when I read that, I had this deep remembering in my body, and perhaps that's because I'm very directly from a lineage of surviving apocalypse. My mother lived through the war in Ethiopia, was a government runaway, has escaped death many times. And there's this deep remembering in my body, in my cells of like, right, this is actually where we get to create from. Like when there's fire, what happens in the soil that allows for new life to pop up, right? And the womb room, even though it seems like, what? How does that have to do with this online women's health platform? My initial receiving of what this could be is I want to steward a space where women who are thinking like this can cultivate their skill, their embodiment, their leadership, their magic, their medicine, so that we have this web of women in all these different places that are going to be stewarding the communities, even if community is your four people, right, that you live nearby, right, that are going to move us into what's next in the wake of this massive unveiling that we are part of right now. So when I orient to what's even happening in the world, it's not to bypass the suffering, right? It's not to bypass the immensity of what's happening. It's actually to hold it with such reverence that we ask, what are we creating here, right? Even in the sovereign cycles work, it's like so much of how I speak about this world of womb sovereignty, which I know you speak to so often too, is like, how do we have more deep reverence for it rather than just being like, oh, it's just, you take the pills, you do this thing, whatever, right? Brush it under the rug. It's like, no, this is life and death. And in that reverence, what beauty and liberation do we get to create, right? In the wake of suffering, what path is being opened up for us to create something even more beautiful? And so that's kind of how, yeah, these authors that I just have so much gratitude for have woven their way into my world. And then from that space, even from the online space of the womb room, really came the in-person space that I get to steward with many others in my community that is oriented to farming and land and growing food and stewarding the in-person community pieces.
Mm.
That was a lot of words, but
No, it's awesome. And it's something that I think about a lot. My own big resistance to like getting into the online world and online work and offerings online, because I'm like, no, we need to be in person and we need to be sitting across from each other. And I do still feel that in-person work is irreplaceable, right? But the space that you guys have been able to cultivate within the womb room and the way in which you're able to bring women into circle and activate their inner medicine and to bring those teachings of liberation work in a way that is so different from the liberation work that I also did kind of like in my earlier 20s, that was so angry and always at protests and just like screaming on social media and fighting, like just fighting so hard in a very yang way, a very masculine way, that one just burned me out, and
yeah.
two didn't actually get anyone free. Like from a lot of the perspectives of what I saw, and it's what you spoke about earlier, which is just like, what is the yin way of liberation work? What is the feminine way of liberation work? Well, it's what all of our female ancestors have been doing for forever, which is that kind of more subtle, more underground, more deeply rooted and community connected medicine work. And it's something that someone got upset with me recently because I've spoken a lot about my own criticisms around, um, I guess, how to say, like abortion rights and like people really, really getting attached to fighting for our rights. And I said, I'm not going to fight because there's other strategies that I've found that are actually significantly more impactful, which is education, calling my sisters into circle, saying, let's learn how to track our fertility. Let's learn how to work with plants to prevent and release pregnancy. Let's tap into the underground networks of midwives and abortion doulas and people who have been doing this work for a very, 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 very long time, literally since the beginning of time. The vast majority of those women being Black women, brown women, indigenous women, poor white women, immigrant women. Like, we've always been here, always, and we're not going anywhere. And so that level of community stewarding that women like you are doing, both online and in person, is profound. And it's so cool to see how you've like taken the inspiration from that, from these incredible Black fiction, science fiction writers, and these
Mhm.
people who are seeing so clearly what's going on right now
Mhm.
and saying, this is what's going to happen. And so let's create something beautiful out of it. Like you were saying,
Mhm.
let's do the transformation work now. We can do it and it's beautiful and it's a gift, actually.
Mhm. Mhm. Yeah, thank you. Yeah, it makes me think about too, especially in this piece of like social movements and liberation and what we're fighting for. And there's this phrase in the womb room, we often say context versus the content being what we're doing and the context being how we're doing it. I like to emphasize that because it's not that there's anything wrong with protesting, right? But how we show up at the protest can vastly change both the outcome, but also the, like you said, like whether or not the freedom, the liberation actually touches and sources from in us or not.
Mhm.
And so much of what I and we teach in the womb room, especially in like our foundational year piece, is like, how do we orient to liberation from the inside out first? Not because the external doesn't matter, not because we're like, oh, it's all just no, 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 but because it's like when we can orient to it in here, then how we move is different rather than waiting until the government gives us our rights or the system changes. It's like, don't they want that from us? Don't they want us to be like totally stuck until they say we can be free? And it's funny because people will use the argument that that is a privilege. Like, I don't know if you've received this, but I received this when I talk about the fertility awareness and teaching. They're like, well, that's only for people who are privileged. Access to the plans, access to information is for the privileged. And I'm like, okay, who benefits from that narrative? If we all buy that and believe that, who benefits? I guarantee you it's not the women who are at the edges of society, right? If we continue to believe that, great, then they'll never have the reclamation of this information. And that doesn't mean we abandon all other strategies, but it takes all kinds. And I am really excited to see more of us doing the grassroots organizing of each one teach one.
Mm.
And there's an audacity to claiming our liberation in the midst of system overhaul, unveiling vast, vast challenges. And even in that, people are like, well, how dare you assert freedom when there is suffering? How could you possibly say we can create liberation from the inside out when there's all this shit going on? And I always think about um, maybe it's cliche, but like Harriet Tubman saying, my people are free. My people are present tense free. And like what an audacious claim and how different. Like it just gives me goosebumps every time. How different than saying one day I will be free. One day people will be free. No, what if we're free now? What difference could it make in how we move? That just makes me, it just, for me, I mean, I'm like, do what's useful. Everyone's going to find something that's useful. But for me, that feels like a useful framing in terms of the longevity too of this path, which we talked a little bit about maybe before we started recording. Like this is we're in it for the long game.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Thank you for that. I'm just like smiling and laughing, and it's just so true when I think about exactly what you were saying of like that's a very privileged stance to have on things, that like there can be joy, that there can be curiosity, that there can be play, that like we can access levels of freedom that are always available to us as our birthright. And it was something I really, really believed for so long. I was like, no. And I'm sure, especially like a lot of white people who have gotten into any of these social justice movements and taken on that identity so strong, like, oh my God, guys, like take a break, like take a sec, really pull yourself out of the film and look at the big picture. And exactly what you were saying of like, question who is benefiting from those beliefs, that like joy is not available, that peace, that freedom, that ease is not available to us, and that it's only a privileged thing that you need to feel guilty about. Like, come on, guys, it's not interesting. Let's move on. Let's move on. Like,
Or even this, like I work with so many women who've internalized that your joy and your aliveness is is like a threat to other people's joy and aliveness, or that you're not deserving of it until there is no suffering. right? It's like, how could I possibly feel joy when someone else is suffering? Like the guilt and shame that that we hold on such a deep level. And especially in the health world, I see how this impacts chronic pain and chronic symptoms is that like deep internalized sense of, uh, yeah, I am bad or wrong to experience this when other people are experiencing something else. And to that, I always say, like, imagine yourself in your most alive state, your most embodied alive state. And as you imagine that, are you more of service or less? Right? Like we get to be more of service from that place. And oh yeah, it makes me that's one of the hills I will stand on all day. As I'm like, no, the world needs you in your aliveness, not in your um obligation. Yeah.
Yeah, thank you. I think that's a good segue into the next section that we're going to be
Yes.
talking about, which
Yeah.
is, in class the other day, it was during this same class when you were talking about
Uh-huh.
the fires,
Oh,
and we were
yeah.
talking specifically about womb tending for fertility. And you just kind of opened the question, like, how do women here in this space feel about your fertility? And understandably, a lot of women were like, how could I ever become a mother based on everything that's going on? I feel like I'm in a constant war zone. And I don't, I deeply want to be a mother. That's what a lot of women said. I deeply want to be a mother, but I don't know if I can do it in this lifetime.
Yeah.
And there's a lot of reasons, of course, for feeling this way. But when I was hearing that conversation and in my own unravelings of a lot of things, particularly within movement spaces, environmental movement spaces more
Yeah.
specifically, there is a very clear indicator of how antinatalist rhetoric, which is essentially like people should stop having kids to save the planet,
Yeah.
how that and the devaluation of family and the devaluation of specifically women's roles as mothers and as matriarchs is drastically impacting our ability to envision a future that is based on the foundation of family and the fabric of family culture. So I would love for you to talk about anything about that, but specifically, how do you see this antinatalist rhetoric directly impacting women's health and women's fertility?
Mhm. Yeah. Ooh. Yeah, it does feel connected to this internalized shame of how can I experience X when other people are experiencing Y. Um, but it's been really fascinating to feel that there's something in the collective consciousness right now, specifically around having children, where so many women I talk to are like, I deeply yearn for motherhood, but the world is just so bad. And how could I bring a child into this world? And there's two pieces. One, it's like, could I bear the pain of bringing a child into a world where there is pain? And it's like, would it even be responsible? How irresponsible of me to have a child in the world where there's already such a tax on our global resources. And again, I want to make the distinction of like the content versus the context, and to really be clear that this is not to say that like everyone should have babies or that it's bad or wrong if someone is like, oh, having children is not for me in this lifetime, right? That is like a perfectly fine and wonderful thing of an expression of our individual agency. But so often, what we think is our individual choice is actually informed by all this cultural soup of really being anti-life, right? In so many ways, our culture is anti-life. And I think Rochelle Garcia Saliga she really speaks to this quite brilliantly of pointing out where our culture is anti-life and how we could be in service to life by centering mothers and children. Um, but especially in this yeah, in this way of the antinatalist rhetoric, anti-woman rhetoric, anti-mother rhetoric, right? It's all connected to being anti-life. And again, I always come back to, even my father will say this, right? Like, oh, bringing children into the world, it's all going to hell in a handbasket. That's his phrase. And I'm like, I just feel our ancestors being like, are you kidding me? Like, through enslavement, through war, through so many apocalypses, of course we had children because there was this sight, there was this knowing that there would be a future and who would be those to steward it. And like, if they had been like, it's really bad out here, we're just gonna not, how irresponsible of us to have children. No one would be here. We wouldn't be here. Right. And so, what if, again, just try on the idea, and if it's useful to you, great. And if not, toss it out. But what if we tried on the idea that the most responsible thing we could do was to create and steward the next generation of world builders? What if, right? Could that be just as true or more true than saying that it would be irresponsible to add children to this world? So that's what I think about. And when I think about impacting health and fertility, oh, there's so much to say about that. But many women now are in conflict about procreation for a lot of reasons, not just antinatalism, but even our culture of um, the ways in which we've delayed family, career first, family later, right? The ways that relationships have shifted, that the sense of how men and women relate have shifted. And I'm saying that even as a woman really married to a woman, right? Like the way that we orient at partnership, all of that. And that's not to say any of those things are inherently wrong. I think they're part of our evolution, but they have created this uh, a greater internal struggle of to procreate or not, fear of fertility, need to get pregnant, don't want to get pregnant, right? So many of us are in that spiral so often, and that directly understanding our psychobiology impacts, the lining of the uterus, impacts our menstrual health, impacts the cycle length, impacts all of these things. And I guess that's part of my prayer in this work too, is just that in understanding some of those connections of how those experiences impact our bodies, that we can create more ease and lightness and trust around them, even in the trust of our fertility. And really, I think all of that comes down to the trust in our aliveness. Like, if it is your aliveness to be a mother, to have a child in this lifetime, could we trust that because it is your aliveness, it is also in service to the collective, right? Just as if it is not, right? If it is your aliveness to dedicate your life to something else completely and to not have your own children in this lifetime, if that's your true aliveness, could we trust that if you are in your true aliveness, that that is also going to be in service to the collective? And so that's, I think, when I work with women one-on-one, part of what I'm hoping to create this space for is that those reframes.
Yeah. Yeah. Thank you. And just kind of Rochelle speaks about this a lot, like this overculture of death
Yeah.
and all of the ways that that has been happening for not just, the past couple decades or the past 500 years of white supremacy, but like really on like a much more longer time scale, this overculture of death, and not combating that, because again, we're not fighting, but coming to that with the opposite of saying, like, what does life mean? What does aliveness mean for you in your body?
Yeah.
And something that I in my own kind of unraveling of all of this and seeing how deeply interwoven it is in my racialized experience as a white person. Yes, white people, we have a collective racialized experience in our whiteness, which is guilt and like shame and like taking on this big thing of like my ancestors fucked a lot of stuff up. And so I'm going to be responsible now and like not do children. And I've seen that a lot within environmental spaces that are very often predominantly white.
Yes.
And then I contrast that with the life that I've lived in the Colombian jungle with my elders, with indigenous people who are like holding it down for the climate movement. These are land protectors and water protectors. These are people who carry the songs of their ancestors and of the land in their blood.
Mhm.
And they would literally never in a million years say,
Exactly.
like, oh, we're going to save the water and the fish by like deciding that we're not going to have babies anymore.
Right.
And so, yeah, I'm curious, like, what your perspective is around how race and also how class and how just kind of like the global north in
Yeah.
general, I would say, how that also impacts this conversation when it comes to climate
Absolutely.
change, when it comes to, doing what we say we want to do, which is like save the planet. Like, what is that whole soup about?
Oh, yes. Thank you. Yeah, it's so true. It makes me think about, so I run the Black Oregon Land Trust. So we're a community land trust doing land preservation, conservation, and agriculture work, especially with Black farmers across the state. And most land trusts are purely conservation focused, and it's a very white field industry. And one of the challenges for us has been because we are shifting the culture of saying, actually, we can conserve and protect land with people in relationship to the land. And that's really, I don't want to say new, but it's an unconventional perspective because in the land trust world, the way you conserve land is you take land, you legally protect it, and you separate it from people from the most part. Maybe people can like go on a walkabout, but there's no people living there because it's protected. So we're saving the ecosystem. We're protecting habitat. And the shift, this is why like a shift of paradigm and worldview is so necessary because indigenous worldviews, not only indigenous to Turtle Island, North America, but really indigeneity globally. I don't know of a single culture, as you spoke to, where we would think of, where it would be thought of that protection of Earth would require a removal of humans. Those things were in collaboration, right? And in relationship with each other. And so there is this racialized picture that we've just adopted in our culture, not any one person, but the it's in the ancestry, it's in the collective psyche, even in the like we either conquer nature, right, or we separate from it to protect it, right? And to come back and to listen to indigenous voices and also to listen to our own hearts, which still carry our own indigeneity, I think it becomes quite obvious that, like, of course, the thriving of our future is going to require require interdependence between all beings, uh, plant, animal, human, spirit. And there is also a class component to this too, because when I think about globally, just at a family level, if you are working class or if you are tending the land, you need your children right? Children are going to carry on not only the legacy, but very practically are going to carry on the work, are going to carry for you when you get older, are going to ensure that the food is on the table. Like there is a I sort of hesitate to use the word, but there is like a class privilege in being like, oh, I'm gonna opt out of that. And again, that's fine on an individual level if that's your aliveness, but um, sometimes there's like this moral superiority around it. And it's like, no, this is the foundation of life. And I think the maybe the last piece I'll say about that is perhaps seemingly ironically, my aliveness around teaching sovereign cycles and teaching fertility awareness and teaching how to work with plants to prevent a pregnancy actually came from seeing the way that particularly Black and Brown women have been forcibly sterilized, where birth control, controlling life, controlling birth, has been used as a eugenicist population control method, not only in the past, but current day. When I was a new birth worker and still attending births in hospital, I watched doctors, particularly on the south side of Chicago, attempt to insert IUDs in low-income women after they gave birth without their consent. Immediately, baby comes out, IUD goes in. Oh, we just assumed you wanted it. Right? I still have so many women who come to me and say, my provider refused to take out my IUD. Right. And there's so many stories about the history, the quite racist and classist history of, I mean, even the words birth control, right? We're controlling birth, we're controlling life. And so even though it might seem like, oh, but we're teaching how to prevent pregnancy, it's like, yes, but we're teaching womb autonomy. We're teaching how we actually can self-govern and collectively support our own innate biological freedom to birth or to bleed, to be pregnant or to not. Um, and yeah, that's something that I think is spoken about less, but especially now, yeah, with our culture of hormonal contraceptives, with the culture of not being able to even speak about womanhood, to not even use the language of mother, which is a whole other topic, but especially from a race perspective, where Black women have fought for so long to even be perceived as women, which is a whole other thing, right? There's just deep implications um, for life on Earth.
Yeah,
Yeah.
100%. Yeah. I want to kind of touch on two things you said before moving forward, which is something that I speak about a lot on this podcast and in my writing, because it has been my deep embodied experience as a person of European descent, grew up in white culture, and somehow ended up spending the past 4 years apprenticing with my indigenous elders from the jungle, living there full time and unraveling all of the lies of colonization that are not only deeply embodied in the people who have been colonized and enslaved over the past 500 years, but going through my own ancestry of what it was to have had 1,500 years of colonization that was
Yeah.
enacted upon us. And
Yep.
then the flip that we did to do the same thing to people. And it's something that I'm grateful to have gone through like hundreds of ceremonies of meeting my indigenous European ancestors and seeing, wow, you guys are really not so different to the elders that I sit with now, who come from a totally different territory, totally different lineage, totally different medicines, totally different essence of like the land itself that they're on, being in the jungle, and me coming from Mother Europe. And also, there is a fabric that is interwoven into every single intact lineages, which is that relationship to the land and
Yes.
that relationship to the spirits of the land and the ancestors of the land. And it's something that I write about a lot and talk about on this podcast and offerings that I want to do in the future, because the ways in which white people get in their own way of healing by not being able to tap into their own lineages of indigeneity, be it like very far away in this current way of what we think about time, but to understand like there's so much more resourcing that we have access to. And then the second thing I want to talk about is what you just brought up kind of at the end. I'm going to write an entire piece that I've been working on specifically about like the eugenics aspect of birth control, forced contraceptive use, forced sterilization,
Yeah.
controlling women's fertility, all of that. I too have a close friend who, after she gave birth to her second daughter, the doctors were like, all right, and we're just going to sterilize you. And she
Yeah.
was like, I want more kids. And they were like, no, you can't. For they said it was for health reasons. It's bullshit. But at the end of the day, they forced her to get the injection. And
Yeah.
so when she was transitioning off of that, like she got the injection taken out maybe 3 months after her birth, she was like, my hormones are all over the map. Like I cannot orient myself to motherhood with my second child that I just birthed, because the fact that like the normal hormonal matrix that occurs after birth was hijacked from me. It was forced upon me within a medical context. And so I really appreciate that you touched on that, because my friend is also, she's Colombian, right? She's a brown woman. And that aspect of what you like, what you are visioning so deeply for everything that you do in all aspects of your life, but with the womb room, is like deep liberation work. And what does that mean?
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, I think that that is a good segue into kind of the last thing that we're going to talk about,
Mhm.
which is the dying art of midwifery, as you put it in one of our classes. So I'd love to ask you, from your perspective, what is the work of an authentic midwife? And how do you see that sacred role, that medicine woman role of the community, being warped in today's expression of midwifery and women's healthcare, specifically within the medical model, but that also is very applicable for like medical midwives and home birth midwives who are working in that realm of the system?
Thank you. When I think of authentic, true midwifery, I think of three sort of categories of things. I think one of someone in the womb room actually named this, started using this phrase, and we talk about it as existential okayness. And someone said, "Oh, Qiddist, you're kind of like Miss Frizzle in Magic School Bus, where you're going on all these crazy rides, you're going into someone's lungs, you're going into the unknown. It's sometimes a little scary. It can be really intense, but Miss Frizzle's like driving the school bus and she's like, this is okay." And there's a level of solidity that I witness in a true midwife that's able to walk with a woman through anything, right? Through death, through pain, through grief, through joy, through celebration, through loss, through birth, through mystery, and to hold that pole of solidity takes an incredible amount of internal practice. Internal practice meaning a consciousness about your own patterns, about your own default states, about your own tendencies, your own shit. And also an internal practice around the energy alchemy the yin and the yang that it takes to set a grid and hold a container that can be an anchor for someone to be in the huge rites of passage and transitions that are part of being here on earth, and especially being in a female body. And that, I think, is a lost art. Not lost, but it is not, it can't be taught in a 3-week course, right? It's not in a textbook. And our systems and structures do not make it possible to operate like that, right? And I worked with and apprenticed with midwives who were under such pressure for time. You know, I have 6 births this month, for government oversight, right? I have to do these things. It's almost impossible to hold. And some women can do it, and my hats go off to them, because it's, I think, even a more intense path to walk, but it's very challenging to hold and practice that level of solidity. And so that's one piece, I think, of authentic midwifery, that existential okayness, that internal skill. Then
And
there's like,
sorry, can I just clarify? You're speaking specifically when it comes to like licensure.
yeah, licensure, but I see it even outside of licensure too. Even a midwife who's not licensed, I think, and sometimes right now even more so, because there's been this push of no licensure, we have this new influx of birth attendants who have the desire to serve, but perhaps haven't had the experience yet and the skill, or are in their own dogma of like, well, it's bad to go to the hospital. That in itself, right, is going to, we call it like impact the threads of something. But yes, certainly in licensure, when we're beholden to the government, that poses its own complications of, well, okay, either, I have to take this, I have to do this vaginal exam legally, but the woman in front of me doesn't want it. Now I'm in a bit of a bind. So either my choices are lie to the government, right? Or go against the woman's wishes. You're in between a rock and a hard place. And I have deep compassion for that, actually. And I think, in the spirit of context versus content, I'm not like, oh, all medical midwives are horrible and the whole thing is just so terrible. But I am like, we have to be really aware of what we're stepping into and what that means. And then how are we going to be inside of that? And that's a question that we all have to ask. And then on the outside of licensure, I see different but similar energetic problems. Um, Either because of a lack of skill, or because of an assertion of what we think birth should be, or what we think a woman should do. And that interrupts our ability to hold existential okayness and solidity for her in any outcome. We often say, like, medicine in all outcomes. How can we hold the possibility of medicine in all outcomes? So that is like a deep path. I don't know if that does that make sense? It's a sort of a big, yeah.
Yes, it does. It does. And again, as I'm so grateful that I'm learning with you because you have a very similar ethos to both Wapio and Rochelle, which is like one, just the rigor of actually getting the education that is required in order to show up in that space. Just knowing, like, the anatomical terms for things, like the baseline and anatomy and physiology kind of things, but then the huge part that is very lacking in a lot of, just, I would say, medical education and spiritual education, which is what you touched on, of the like being in right relationship with yourself, really, at the end of the day. And it's something that all three of you, these incredible women and midwives and medicine women that I'm learning from, just really, really push, not like aggressively, but like are so clear of like, your deepest work to be of service to others is actually to be really, really deeply in integrity with yourself,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Um, yeah. Next thing I want to ask you just about that is, when I think about my time in the jungle and who is seen as a partera, which is a Spanish word for midwife, is, they're the medicine women of their community. They are the abuelas, they're the grandmothers and the grandmothers' granddaughters and daughters and that kind of thing.
Yeah.
And going to a partera is just as ceremonial as it is to go to a taita, which are like the male shamans, the yajeseros, the ayahuasqueros, the men who serve medicine, and the women who serve medicine. But it's the same kind of a relationship
Yeah.
in terms of the weight of ceremony. And
Yeah.
so I love to hear from your perspective, what is the ceremonial work of midwifery that has been really stripped from birth in terms of like song, ritual, energetic protection, spirit baby, and ancestor communication, lineage cleaning, all of
Mm.
that kind of stuff? And how do we revive and infuse those practices into our modern expressions of midwifery?
Mm. Ceremony can become so, mm, we kind of put ceremony, capital C ceremony, on this pedestal, right? And we're like, okay, I need to learn from a particular teacher and I need to know a particular lineage. And it's this grand thing that I have to be kind of initiated into in order to hold ceremony. And all of those are beautiful and so needed. And I think feel inaccessible for many women who are like, I don't have that experience yet. I don't know. And when I think about ceremony, I think there's an honoring of the sacred nature of what's happening, meaning like of source, of God. There's an opening, there's an intention or something that's offered, and there's a closing. That is like the container of a ritual. And I say this to say that, like, you don't have to wait until you've like done the training, or you don't have to like go and find a lineage that's like this way far out thing to be able to like start to come back home to what you're speaking to, which is like to be with a midwife, to be with a medicine keeper, to walk as a woman is ceremony, right? And so when I think about that in midwifery care, I'm like, every time I put my hands on a woman, it is ceremony, right? It is an opportunity to set an intention, to call in who is present, who is holding the space, to offer, and then to hold a closing, right? Every time that there is a transition period, right? Like a preparation for a birth, right? A mother blessing. There is an opportunity to be in gathering with song, to have other women offer their prayers, their hands. And it doesn't have to be so complicated. Like we can get into all of the beautiful learnings of like, how do we tend up the generational line and work with the thing in the ancestry that might show up in the birth. And we can talk about spirit baby communication and these more like intricate pieces. And I think what I feel especially enlivened around is seeing more of us come home to our birthright of we already know how to do it, right? It just takes practice and courage of like every time we are with someone. If you're with a pregnant woman and you say like, can I rub your feet, right? And can you place your hands on a woman and say a prayer, and you don't have to know how to pray. You can just like ask for protection and give gratitude. and offer whatever is present with your heart and then close it, right? And say thank you. And like leave her feeling more sealed and contained at the end. That's, if we could just do that, regulated midwives can do that. Sisters can do that, right? Like a family member can do that. And um, I think I am probably still just a baby in my own journey of like, what does it mean to hold ceremony? Um, but there is a way that we can walk with the awareness of all of what is unseen. That's really the other piece of like when we walk, like we know that the great grandmother is in the room and the spirit baby is in the room and the plants have something to say and like that all of that is here, then it's impossible for anything to not be ceremony, I think. But I would love to hear from you, especially having been like learning with elders and learning in ceremony, how you like integrate that or what it means, what ceremony means for you in your work now.
Yeah. No, such a beautiful response that you offered. There were parts when I was tearing up because I think that that is the most beautiful thing that I received being in the jungle for as long as I did and having the relationships with my elders that I do, which is there comes a point when you're drinking a lot of medicine, a lot of like, 3, 5 ceremonies a week, all night long, singing and praying and just, purging and healing and going through so many altered states of consciousness. And then you come back to earth and you go back to your house and you eat breakfast and you get back into bed and you sleep a little, or you like grab a machete and you go out like with your elders. And the line between the worlds starts to get really thin. And you also start to see how, my elders, indigenous people who drink multiple times a week, there's reverence and there's a deep respect for the sacredness of what it means to sit in like a yahe ceremony and an ayahuasca ceremony, of course. But also, it's like so casual in a way. Like, it's really just people showing up to their grandpa's house, hanging out with him. There is no like big thing. Like, they just at some point start building a fire, at some point start turning off all the lights and setting up candles. At some point, you get called up to take your cup of medicine, and then you're in your hammock, and then, whoa, okay. And same thing in the morning. Like, there's this flow and this integration of what it means to dance between those worlds and those altered states of consciousness that also require you to be fully present and fully in the flow and fully in the surrender of like, okay, now I'm moving into this, and how do I just be in it? And okay, now I'm moving out of that into another thing, and I'm just in it. I'm fully, fully here and I'm available. And I think one of the reasons that I actually decided to learn with Wapio is because one of her students asked one time, like, I've never been, I'm not a mother, I've never been pregnant. Like, I don't know what it's like. Like, what place do I have in a birth? To which Wapio responded, have you ever drank ayahuasca? And the woman was like, yeah. And she was like, it's the same thing as birth. And so that's something that I am thinking about integrating into not only the path that I'm taking in birth work, but all of the other things that I do in life, which is like life is a ceremony. Every moment is a ceremony. And if you're walking with that consciousness, what you said of like, how do I intentionally open this moment? How do I intentionally stay fully present in this moment? And how do I intentionally close this moment and then open another moment? Like life is ceremony. So, yeah, I wasn't expecting that question, but it's a beautiful thing for me to articulate and think about. So, thank you. Yeah.
Yeah, thank you. It's beautiful. Mm.
Beautiful. Well, we're going to transition into our extended episode that I'm really excited about, which is going to be talking about the difference between yin yang, masculine and feminine, and male and female, getting into a lot of stuff about gender and biological sex. My listeners know that I've been on a long gender journey in my life and have been realigning with womanhood after like 7 years of being really, really attached to a non binary identity. And you and a lot of other practitioners, but particularly you and Mara, have been really integral in my understanding of being able to ground and clarify my own lived experience as a woman and what feminine means and gender, specifically with the language that you guys work with yin and yang. So I'm excited for that extended episode that we'll move into. But before we close, I'd love to just give you an opportunity to talk about any upcoming offerings that you guys are having in the womb room, how people can find you, get connected to you, all that good stuff.
Thank you. And I'm so excited. That's going to be really juicy. Okay. So yes, the Womb Room is an online learning and medicine space. I call it a part school, part church, part clinic. So there's a few different ways that you can interact with it. If you are looking for one-on-one support, with working with the symptom from the perspective of our psychobiology, you can book a clinic call with one of our practitioners, even if you're not a member yet of the space. So I can share a link for that. We have a few different ways that you can participate. If you would like to start to dive into that psychobiology learning, we have a monthly membership option that dives into a monthly learning opportunity around a particular space in the body. And there's options for being able to share in the group and learn, and you get access to a whole library of classes on everything from menstrual pain to hormones to uh, yeast infections to all these things from this perspective of how our psyche impacts our symptoms. So there's that. And then we have our school. So our school is a multi-year journey for those who are wanting to really explore what does it mean to be free here on earth at this time as a woman? How do we build some of those things I talked about around that existential okayness, that feeling of like I'm actually liberated on the inside of me and I can move through my relationships and my life from that place. And then also, how do we cultivate practitioner skills? So the foundational year of that is called Chrysalis. It's a year-long journey, and we enroll every April. So I can share some information about that. And then very exciting, two upcoming things that anyone can jump into this spring. One is Oracle Body, and it's going to be a journey into how to navigate any symptom, not really from the learning space of the logical mind, but what are the practices of how do we get into the subconscious and into the body to navigate no matter what symptom it is, and how can we work with it as a map for liberation. So that will be opening soon with me. And then we have Union. And I'm sure we'll talk about this in the secondary episode, but Union is the home for our exploration of yin and yang and what does relational liberation look like on the inside of us and on the outside. And we take a lot of the popular teachings about polarity and masculine and feminine and look at, okay, where's there truth in there and where can we actually broaden it to an understanding of the foundational energies that create anything in the universe so that we can shift out of, am I doing this right? Am I doing this wrong? Am I feminine enough? Am I right? And actually get into how do we build our range to be able to play in our relationships in ways that create more harmony and ease. So that we'll be sharing more about, but yeah, those are some of the ways.
Yes, I'm so excited. I'm definitely going to be doing union with you guys. And I think at some point in the future when I'm not doing so many like long-term trainings, I would really love to also join Chrysalis.
Yes.
It'll be coming, but yeah, I'm super excited about all of the work that the womb room offers, like to people who don't know anything about it. When I first got in and saw the like library of work that is accessible to people in the womb room, I was like, oh my, I could spend hours and hours just like devouring all of this content. You guys have done an incredible job of creating a space that taps into so many aspects of women's health, like what you were speaking about, the psychobiology of things, and not just the like, here's the symptom, here's the herbs to fix it, like one and done, right? It goes so much deeper. And
Mhm.
so for anybody who is like curious about this, as someone who joined the womb room, like I guess 3 months ago now, do it. Just do it. I'm telling you, you're going to learn so much and it's going to really transform your understanding of both health and womanhood and community as well, I would say. So,
Mhm.
yeah.
Wow. Thank you, Claire. Thank you so
Yeah.
much for having me.
Yeah. Thank you. Seriously. Thank you for the work that you do. Thank you for the example that you set. Thank you for the path that you walk. It's women like you who inspire women like me to continue this work and to move forward. So, seriously,
Mhm.
thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah. Cool. Well, you guys can find that extended episode over on my Substack, and I will have all of Qiddist links in the show notes. And yeah, thank you guys so much for tuning in. Mm-hmm.